Alexander-Arnold, it's running!
From doubter to believer.
Hello Reds, welcome to the podcast. This is the LFC Couch. I'm Nick Koloski, your host for this one, joined by the ever-incredible, ever-isolating George Xanthis. How are you on this fine evening, sir?
I'm good, man, because Pete and I did our post-Tottenham pod. I think we were drunk on victory. As Johnny Drama says, victory, screaming atop the Grand Canyon in Entourage, for those who don't know who Johnny Drama is. But I'm also cheering because I'm on day 13, coming up to day 13 of my isolation. Tomorrow's my last day. So, I've done my bit. Pity that, bus drivers and quarantine workers and, air crew that come into the same hotel get to leave and go walkabout and spread COVID around New South Wales as they have been doing. But you know what? I've done my part and the other quarantined people have done their part. So, yeah, I'm happy to be out of here in about 24 hours or so.
So one more day. The great escape is upon you, sir. You shall be free once again. Free at last. As a very famous person by the name of Martin Luther King once said, free at last. And that's what you shall be.
I think the stakes were higher for him, but,
they were.
I'll still scream things like I'm free.
Yeah, 100%. You can be like the Shawshank Redemption. You can be when he escapes from the sewers, just in the rain, just arms out.
They're going to knock on my door and it's going to be empty, and like the curtains will be like waving in the wind, and there'll be like a little chip, little insert in the wall where I managed to make my escape.
Oh, what a movie, Shawshank Redemption. Anyways, I'm not here to talk about the Shawshank Redemption, even though I'd actually quite enjoy that, one of my favourite movies of all time. But as you did such a fine job in the post-Tottenham match with Peter the Coach... sorry, it's Curtis Firmino. Sorry, Curtis Firmino.
Good catch.
Like I said, I got so fired up after that. I thought, this is fantastic. I got so G'd up. I said, we've got to do something now for pre-Palace. And that's what we're doing right now, because we are talking pre-Crystal Palace. It is the early kickoff on Saturday night for us, so it's not a bad fixture for us to watch in the Southern Hemisphere, because it's nice relative time. You can go out, have a little bit if you're allowed out. Like I said, if you're in the Northern Beaches, just stay home. But if you're out in the western suburbs, whatever, that's where the COVID thing is, isn't it?
Yeah, Northern Beaches. Actually, that's where I can choose where I want to stay. I can either stay Northern Beaches or Inner West, and I don't know if I'll be choosing that Northern Beaches option.
Not anymore, my friend. Not anymore. But what we can choose is to support the Reds, and that's what we do, and we do it very damn well. And because we're going to support the Reds taking on Crystal Palace, we are playing away at Selhurst Park. It is first, outright, read it properly, hear it properly, first in the Premier League, 28 points, Liverpool FC against 12th placed Crystal Palace on 18 points. And granted, it has to be said, they've had a few decent results themselves. I mean, they beat Leeds. They somehow they lost to a Newcastle United team who I thought maybe they would have probably beaten them, but they've beaten United in the early stages of the season as well. They drew late against Tottenham, and they drew against West Ham just the other week in a game where Christian Benteke was actually sent off. So the former Red will not be able to face his former club. But in saying that, in Liverpool's case, we used to go through this whole thing of Crystal Palace being a bogey team, and we go back to the 13-14 season, the infamous Cristanbul, or whatever the bullshit they ended up calling that 3-3 match when we were going for goal difference when chasing City. For you, Palace still a bogey team for us? Because we've won in the last 6 matches against them, and it seems that we always seem to manage a win somehow, and convincingly in some instances too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've actually got this. I'm trying to. Here we go. Head to head wins. So I'm trying to look. I'll try and read these SofaScore stats the next little break that I get. But to answer your question, I always just want to keep. You're kind of like a Conor McGregor, how he taps their forehead in UFC when he's boxing them. He's kind of keeping them literally at arm's length. I wouldn't mind just keeping him there. I'll have to say to you, the Fulham game going into that, I was like, no, they should be fine. Brighton, I thought should be fine. This game, I'm not going to think the same thing, even though history does say that we've gone past them quite easily. They've got weapons, and if Zaha is going to be playing, which I'm sure he would be, it's just always a threat for us. So look, people can rightly say they have not been a bogey team for us for a while. I'm just looking at, I just kind of doing the Jurgen Klopp thing, where it's kind of like I'm not looking at the history, I'm just looking at the present moment. And as it stands, they've taken points off Tottenham, they've beaten Man United, yeah, which isn't that hard these days, but they just have an ability to screw around with you. So yeah, watch them carefully.
It's interesting you say that, because they do have some decent players in their squad, and over the last few seasons we have seen them do very, very well. But over the years, as Roy Hodgson has sort of solidified his status there as their manager, as he has been for a few seasons now, some of the players have been in and out of the squad, like Benteke, who I mentioned, who's actually out for this match, but he's had his moments, and he actually scored against West Ham the other day, but obviously 2 yellow cards, jumping and elbowing. I don't know how the guy's supposed to get leverage on his opponent, but anyways, so he's missing out. So then someone else is going to have to come in and fill the void for him. But in saying that, for our guys, we've had to have players fill the void for us pretty much from day one of this season. So I think in comparison, when you see the two teams, even though we've won last 7 matches against them in all competitions, I think they are still a team that you can say can cause you problems, because, as you said, with the likes of Zaha playing and Eze, who's come into the team as well, which sort of like lets Zaha do a little bit more, because Eze can occupy that left wing space, or that left side of the midfield, which may give Trent something to think about. And I know how you guys mentioned his defending in the post Tottenham pod. I don't know if he's going to need to do much defending here, but Selhurst Park with some fans as well, it can be a very ruckus place. They're not going to have their full active support, but they're still going to have fans there cheering them on. And I think that's a bit of a G-up for any other team playing against Liverpool. And I think Klopp was asked in the presser as well, something about all these other teams. They all seem to lift their game when they play Liverpool. Is it because they're champions? And Klopp basically said, since I've been here, everyone wants to beat Liverpool because we're Liverpool.
Absolutely, and I think it's a good point that you mentioned the fans being in the stadium, because I'm not sure who mentions it in the post Fulham match reports. If it might even be Jurgen Klopp, but I feel like I heard either a Robertson or a Henderson or a Trent. Someone else mentions it after the game. Someone from Liverpool, whether it's Klopp or a player, actually says we were a little bit taken aback by the atmosphere. That there's 2,000 people, and it does help. So it's a really good point that you bring up, because I do think that that Selhurst Park, if they do have the fans, they do. Is that confirmed? They got 2,000.
I think they do, but wasn't it the case that London teams may have to go into Tier 3 lockdown as well? So that could be a question mark in that sense there, because I think that helped them a lot against Tottenham, because that's who they played when they ended up coming back to draw that game.
And they had fans.
And as they did, yeah, I'm pretty sure they had fans for that game there, and that was only 2 rounds ago. So that may play a part into it if they do end up having fans at Selhurst Park in about 24 hours time, give or take, from when recording this podcast. So that could be a factor, but because we've been playing without fans for so long, everyone's sort of gotten used to not having fans, and then having fans back into the stadiums, it might give teams a bit of an extra buzz now. And yeah, like that could have been the difference between ourselves and Tottenham just the other day. This could definitely spur Palace on, and Palace are still the last team to have beaten us at Anfield, even though we're not playing at Anfield. I think they might always look back at that and say, well, if we can beat these guys in their own backyard, well, why can't we beat them in our backyard when they don't have their best players on the pitch, but our players are still doing what they're doing and doing it bloody well?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just looking at it now. I finally figured out how to use this SofaScore head-to-head thing. It looks like the 9th of November 2015. It's Crystal Palace 2-1 against Liverpool at Anfield. And then from then, it's a Liverpool win, away, Liverpool win, away, Liverpool win. No, then Crystal Palace win. Oh no, there's the home win. They won 2 on the bounce at home. That's actually in 2017, the 24th of April as well. Shit, so they did the double on the home games with us. That's very interesting. So it wasn't 2015, it's 2017. So that's when the home record starts from there. Let's just go from there then. So we win a club friendly against them. And then we win 1-0 in 2017. We win in 2018 again, twice in 2018. We win again in 19, twice. And then this year we won again. So it's been non-stop wins since we lost against them. You said the streak was something like 7. Counting it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 6, about 6 games if we include the friendly at 7. So yeah, I mean, bogey team. I mean, that would suggest not. But like I said, they're always going to be dangerous, and if they've got those fans, Fulham impacted us. Like that was an issue when they had 2,000 fans screaming for them. They were just able to press, and I said this to Pete, and I mentioned this in our pod, perhaps in the pre-Tottenham. I said I think Jurgen's they kind of just have to prepare for one game at a time, and I think they've gone we've got 3 games, and they probably prep for Tottenham, and then when Fulham comes around, despite all the drill work and all the whatever ways in which they were thinking about how we're going to unlock and play against Tottenham. They kind of go, look, guys, use a version of that against Fulham. And that didn't work in the first half, clearly, because Fulham came at us. And you can kind of see against Tottenham, we were prepared for the bus parking. It's so interesting that the team coming near last, didn't presented more of a threat than the team coming first. That's just what Mourinho does. So I think what Klopp did was he's probably gone, I think we need to prepare for Tottenham. And if the players can figure out something on the field against Fulham, good. It didn't quite happen, but we came back, thank goodness. And then I think the same is said for Crystal Palace. I think what's fantastic is, Jurgen Klopp says this a lot. I remember when we came 4th that season, when we drew against Southampton in Klopp's first full season in charge, and we get 4th. And it's the Milner penalty miss against that big, tall idiot. And Jurgen Klopp says, I think this is 1 point gain, not 2 lost. And everyone thought he was crazy. And we ended up winning 4th place off Arsenal by probably a point or so. So I think the Fulham result, it's a good draw in the context of this triplet. Because what's happening now is we're not going to get done that same way. This team prepared for Tottenham, and the Fulham game caught them by surprise. Now coming up against Crystal Palace, they've got the knowledge, they've got the memory of the bus parking team in Tottenham. So Liverpool are ready for Hodgson to sit back and be a shit. But if Hodgson decides to come out with his London home crowd the same way Fulham did, Liverpool aren't falling for that twice. This Liverpool team knows how to learn from mistakes. So I have a good feeling that we're prepared for both of those situations, and it's just another rung on the belt for this Liverpool team. More for it to learn. How could it learn even more? Well, that's the beauty of this team. It keeps learning. It's not this team that gets to the top and thinks it's the best. They constantly want to improve. So I think that bodes well for us.
100%. We're always about moving forward and progressing, and Klopp's a big advocate of that as well. And we can see that now. I think we'll move on to the to the team, maybe not the starting 11, but the squad in general. And talking about progressing as a team, we have to see the progression of the fantastic Reece Williams from the other day. Also, Curtis Jones. Like I want to see more of him in the midfield now. Like I agree with yourself and Pete. I think he should be a starter in these games. If we're going to play Fabinho at centre back, and we're going to need someone playing as a defensive mid, we can have Henderson or Wijnaldum there and let Jones do the running around, do that rainbow that you talk about, going across from left to right. I have no issues with that. And you can see now, I think it's safe to say a lot of Liverpool fans, if not 99% of them, I think we all panicked and feared for the worst when Van Dijk was out, then when Gomez got out, then when Thiago got out, then when Alisson was out for a couple of weeks as well. And we all thought, shit, here we go. The party's over now, effectively. But we've only just gone and kicked on and gone 3 points outright first, using academy players, using players who maybe we thought we'd never actually see play regular football for Liverpool, maybe just yet. And I think it's good to see the squad growing as well, because it gives you something different in those midfield options, gives you something different in the defense. The front line does what the front line does, and you do have players to come in and out. So, I mean, when it comes to the squad for this Palace game, having just played out a very fantastic match against Tottenham Hotspur, granted, as you mentioned, the Fulham and also the Brighton maybe stumbles along the way. If Palace do look to retreat and hit us on counterattacks as maybe Tottenham tried to, do you think we might approach this the same way we approached a Mourinho bus park?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I was alluding to before. I think that Klopp's probably looked at this triplet and just gone, I've only got time for coaching one style, for one game, and he's kind of prepared for Tottenham, and he's got his result. It's worked. And everyone's looking at the Fulham result as this doom and gloom. But like I was saying, it's a great lesson to learn. But as you were alluding to just there, if Crystal Palace are going to do that counter-attacking thing again, one of the greatest goals for us to concede is that Son goal, because now we know what to expect from that. Now we know how to defend it. I think. Klopp mentions in his press conference how Gini Wijnaldum says just before the game, I think he was the loudest voice saying we start strong, and he says that he also said it in the second half, and then he jokes, well, we didn't start the second half too well, but we kind of had another moment where after 10 minutes, after we sort of survived the Tottenham onslaught at the beginning of the second half, again we started dominating again. So it was interesting for him to say that it's Gini Wijnaldum. He seems to be at the center of everything. I think we'll come back to that. It's just, this is his season. I said to Pete, I may have even said it on the pod, or I've said it over the phone with him. It's got shades of Xabi Alonso, where Alonso has been told by Benitez, you can leave. And Wijnaldum hasn't been told that, but by not being given a £200,000 a week deal, they're kind of saying, well, you're not as important as Henderson or Salah, or, because Henderson, I think, as the captain, is supposed to get at least as much as our top earners. He's probably getting something close to that. So Wijnaldum's looking at all these players going, and even Fabinho's probably on near 200, and he's going, yeah, I'm just as important. And so it reminds me of the Xabi Alonso incident, but the situation where he just played out of his skin. But just going back to that thing of the best goal we can concede, and the best result right now for that Tottenham game is the way it is right now. We won 2-1 with a 90th minute winner, and we still conceded a goal that keeps us on our toes. So Crystal Palace have got Zaha is like a poor man's Son. I say that in that he's a winger, pseudo striker, tricky, quick, 6'1", 6'2", comfortable on both feet. He's obviously nowhere near as good as Son, but that ball that Lo Celso plays to Son, they're going to be looking for that Crystal Palace. Like you just said, that counter-attack. So the best thing that could have happened to us was concede that goal, get that wake-up call, and I have a feeling someone like Reece Williams, I would love to give him another game. I have a feeling that Matip's coming back in. I might give it a rest for this point, because I don't want to go too far, but I think we can talk about Reece Williams a little bit more for sure.
I think so too. In saying that, with the squad that'll play, interesting that Mane has pretty much. I think he scored a lot of goals against Palace. I think he's scored in every single meeting against Crystal Palace, and he hasn't scored in a few matches as well, even though he's still vital and pivotal to this squad. Do you think that there could be a chance where he might be on the bench for this game and someone else goes into the starting 11, since we don't have Jota and Shaqiri's out, Chamberlain's still coming back from his injury, so the only other person is Curtis Firmino's favourite son of Liverpool, Divock Origi. Mm-hmm. Do you think he might get a run? Do you think he might get a run instead of Mane if we are looking to maybe give him a rest? As I think I agree that he is looking a little bit tired, but he's still pushing along, doing what he needs to do for the team. And man, if that ball from Jones to Mane for that turn to do Aurier, whoever it was he was up against, we smacked the crossbar. If that goes in, everyone's lauding Mane and then everything's all forgotten. But do you think Mane needs to have a bit of a rest? And would you rest him against Palace, who he loves scoring against?
I think it's probably due. He starts against Fulham, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, it's safe to say you can probably put your house on Mane having started any game. And then he plays the full game against Tottenham. Keep in mind, nobody rests against Tottenham. No one, Naby Keita doesn't even get to come on. When the final whistle goes, he hugs Klopp. That's how on the bench he still was. So if there's any player that I think needs to have a rest, definitely Sadio Mane. Take a leaf out of Pete's book here. I think, and it just goes back to my point that I was making the other day when I was coming to Divock Origi's defense. He's not third choice. I mean, I keep saying this. We will, and this is credit to Pete for bringing this up. We'll probably see Oxlade-Chamberlain at left wing before we see Divock Origi come into the side. It's so funny how many permutations and how many things need to go wrong for Klopp to start thinking about Origi out there. I think it's Oxlade-Chamberlain, if he's fit. I mean, he's on the bench. That means he has to be able to play. I think it's not a bad shout for him to go left wing. I don't like him there, but I'm sure Pete would be happy with me saying I would rather Oxlade-Chamberlain out on the left wing than Divock Origi. It just feels like more of a utility option, and Chamberlain plays on the left against Southampton last year or the year before and cuts in and scores that goal where it's kind of the ball's along the ground and trickles. And that was against a bit of a bus parking. Southampton aren't a bus parking team, but they were forced to that day, and we were trying to pick the lock. So, I would rest Mane. I think it makes sense. We can all be proven wrong and look like fools when we look at the starting lineup. I think Mohamed Salah's game, like me and Pete were saying on the post-Tottenham pod, Salah's like a Messi. He gets the ball and he's a playmaker. He's trying to. He's actually his chance creation has been incredible, and it shits me when I see people on Twitter and whatever saying Salah's given the ball away again and blah blah blah. He's going for it. He's sitting there in that pocket of space just below the right winger's position, just out in the corner of the box, just outside the corner of the box, and he's putting that floater into Robertson a few times. And he's almost set up Robertson to Jota a few weeks ago. He's almost set up Robertson a few times against Tottenham. He's put some great balls in against Fulham. He's doing a great job there, but the way in which he plays in that position, it doesn't really need him to be as athletic as what Mane is. Mane's running a lot. Salah is managing his fitness pretty well. So I think Salah can afford to start this game. Yeah, Mane, let's give him a rest. And maybe it's also time for Minamino. I think Firmino put in a lot of yards against Spurs again. But he's so important to the chemistry of that front three and also linking the midfield. So part of me would probably still start Firmino, but of those front three, if someone needs to rest, it has to be Mane.
In that case, before we move over to Crystal Palace's potential team or starting lineup, just for ourselves, obviously we know a few of the players are out. But the good news is that Thiago is back in training, and he was at Anfield the other day. He also posted something on socials, as you guys said, saying, see you soon, or time is coming up, or something like that. And Klopp said as well that he's doing individual training, and next week is when we're going to reintroduce him back into the team training to see how he goes. So that'll be for the next match thereafter. But for now, I think that the midfield is still going to be as we've seen it, though. But if Keita was ready to come on just before full time to kill time against Spurs, he may be looking to start in this match. Because Jones has played a lot of football lately, and I don't know if you want to heap a lot of pressure and intensity on a youngster. Even though he's young, I mean, players are still human. They can still get injured, touch wood, in many various ways. And the last thing we want to do right now is risk him of having fatigue or maybe overplaying himself. So we might see Curtis maybe have a break and come on off the bench perhaps. But I agree. Like I said, Matip will probably be back in the defensive role for this because, safe to say, whilst Palace have a fair few players out in Martin Kelly, former Red, also Benteke, as I said, suspended. Mamadou Sakho, he's a potential, but maybe doubtful at the same time. But again, they're missing Wayne Hennessy in goal, so they've got Gaeta, who's been deputising, who's done an okay job, I suppose. but their defensive lineup is pretty old, man. Like the centre back pairing of Gary Cahill, who's like early mid 30s now, after playing so many years for Bolton and Chelsea, so he might be able to be got at. Kuyate is a versatile player. Of course, we've got former Red as well, and Nathaniel Klein, who's at Crystal Palace. So he's maybe looking to start this match and come up against his former club. So, I mean, the defensive line isn't the greatest, but it's also not the worst. But I'd be more looking at their forward line because they could do some damage, because you can definitely see someone like Zaha or an AU or a Townsend or even an Eze or a Schlupp bombing down the wings and trying to cause problems for ourselves if we maybe overplay our hand at pressing too much or going too high up their pitch. That's where we leave ourselves a little bit open for the counterattack.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a player that's I'm looking at Crystal Palace's missing players. It says here. I mean, it says, yeah, like you were saying, Wayne Hennessy, Martin Kelly, Connor Wickham, Nathan Ferguson, Tyrick Mitchell. I don't know who that is. But like you said, Sacco is also out. But there's a player that they've got out there in Connor Wickham. The thing is that they don't have Benteke because of the red card, and if Wickham's injured, it's good news for us because there's a similar player to Connor Wickham. They both remind me of each other, and that's Ollie McBurney that plays for Sheffield. And he was he was dealt with very well by it would have been Nat Phillips in that game if I'm not mistaken. But he wins the pen, McBurney, and there's just an awkwardness to those big strikers where they win that first ball, and we saw Tottenham, win only one, but it was a deadly one where they did the double header win. In the past, we've seen Man United with Lukaku exploit that winning those second balls and whatnot. And I think it's Pete that was saying that Henderson was responsible for mopping up a lot of those second balls. But I'm kind of happy to see that they don't have one of their big rocks coming on the field. It looks like it's probably IU and Zaha that'll be up front. But the good thing is that Zaha's played these last two games, if I'm not mistaken. Crystal Palace played Tottenham, and Zaha's he's pretty much he would have been playing. Was he playing that game? Let me just have a look. Was he? Just look, yeah, he's played the whole game against Tottenham. He's played the whole game against or close to it recently against West Ham. So yeah, we got to also put ourselves in their shoes. Crystal Palace don't do this. They don't play these many games at once. And I wonder if Hodgson was one of the drop kicks that voted for no 5 subs, or whether he was. I don't know, because they voted again. That was part of Klopp's presser, that they voted once again at the midway of the season, 10 clubs for, 10 clubs against or something, which is not enough to bring it in. So it got closer. So some teams decided to stop, but it's still not enough. But yeah, I think a side similar to what we saw against West Ham, despite the fact I think Jurgen Klopp mentioned that Jeffrey Schlupp is one of the players that he thought was rested. Jurgen Klopp's press conference, he was alluding to the fact that it looks like Palace had made some plans for Liverpool. They weren't kind of going all in on West Ham. They were keeping Liverpool in mind. However, to combat that, I mean, they've lost Benteke, they don't have Wickham, and Zaha's played those 2 games. So the best thing we can hope for, especially in the situation where we have that Son counter attack, a mirror image of that happening, it's great that we've got a tired Zaha on the end of those.
That's what I was getting at. Fatigue may play into it for Spurs, not for Spurs, right? It's got Spurs in my mind. For the Palace fans, not fans either, bloody hell. For the Palace players, let's just say it's late at night, forgive me. For the Palace players, fatigue, like fatigue for myself. For them, so if Zaha, we know he's that quick, zippy player, so if he's played 2 in a row and 2 games in the space of 5 days, and now he's going for 3 in the space of 7 days, that's a lot of football for these teams who are not used to playing a lot of games. So it might work well for us because we've got the experience, we've got the backing, we know exactly what we need to do. And just on that substitution fiasco, with sticking to the 3 subs, they've increased the bench now to 9 players for the head concussion injury situation that happened a couple of weeks ago with Luis, and also with Raul Jimenez, where they've got extra players now. So all that gives you is a couple of extra players to pick from, but you can still only make 3 subs. So
I know it doesn't change much.
yeah, it's like, oh, well, I can pick, I can have more players on there, which is nice, but the extra players you'll put on that bench are not necessarily the players you want to put on there, because you've already got your 5 or 6 or 7 players for the bench already. So I don't know what the FA or the Premier League are getting at with that thing, but that's a whole nother topic altogether. But to the game itself now, as I said, we're the early kickoff, so it's nice time for everyone to watch. We've drawn our last 4 matches away in the Premier League, and we lost that one, infamous one, to Aston Villa by extraordinary circumstances. Surely we can't go in for a 5th away draw now. Surely we're going to have to win this game if we want to actually put a stamp on us being defending Premier League champions.
Yeah, well, moreover from what we were talking about before, I mean, this Crystal Palace side, I was just even looking at the comparison of the two lineups. Milivojevic and MacArthur started midfield both games. They're playing a 4-4-2, it looks like. Andros Townsend plays one of them, and Jeffrey Schlupp plays the other. So Schlupp is playing against Spurs, so he seems to be the first choice. And then Andros Townsend, who is so good for Crystal Palace, by the way, he's a bit of a phantom for them. He just comes in and scores the odd bomb. There's that Eze guy that you were talking about. Is it Eberechi Eze, who's played in both of the games. Van Aanholt has played full game at left back, so he's got some minutes in his legs. Nathaniel Klein, as you said, will come in, even though Joel Ward is the player that was playing against West Ham. And it looks like it's Kouyaté and Cahill are probably the desired two, although Scott Dan is also still knocking around, and I think he's the player who scored against us when they last beat us. So the reason I bring all of that up again with the lineup is just comparing what lineups they had versus Tottenham and West Ham to see what they're trying to do, but also it's the fact that if there's ever a chance for us to break this little 4-game draw streak, it should be now. This Crystal Palace team would be tired, and this Liverpool team know how to deal with this amount of fitness more. And I remember coming out of the Hodgson era, and it wasn't Dalglish's fault, but the Liverpool side got really unfit. So I'm not sure how much fitness comes into, especially someone like Roy Hodgson is a bit of a dinosaur. The comparison between the two teams' fitness and their programs and whatnot is night and day. So I think that'll play into our hands, and it's a great opportunity for us to kind of exhaust Crystal Palace and hopefully get the win against them.
The other thing is, too, the positive part of us playing early is that we would have set the benchmark already for this round, because Southampton are hosting Manchester City, and Southampton are absolutely flying this season. So Hassel-Hoodle, I think that's his name, Hassel-Hoodle?
Yeah, something like that. I love him.
Killing it. Yeah, he's killing it at the moment, so fair play to him.
It reminds me of the governor from Walking Dead. You ever seen The Walking Dead? There's that governor guy. Anyway, keep going.
And then we've got Everton hosting Arsenal, and Arsenal, I like Peter's thing, Arsenal fighting for relegation. I thought that was pretty funny. But Everton as well flying up there, so they want to keep pace with the top 4, and Arsenal want to get into that top 4. And then on the next night, Tottenham then host Leicester, and then Tottenham are trying to recover from this loss to us, and then Leicester are trying to keep into that top 4, top 6 chasing as well. Then United take on Leeds in that derby there, and I reckon that's going to be a decent match, because Leeds want to get up there, Man U want to get on a winning streak. So it's all happening for us. Like, it seems like the scene is set for us to say, yep, we're going to Palace, bang, we're going to win from whatever score, and you guys have to come catch us now.
It's a great point that you bring up, because I'm not sure who says this, if I've seen or heard this on Twitter or on another podcast somewhere, or whether it was someone on our pod, maybe if it was Pete or yourself. We're kind of, I think it may have even been Pete. We're not really good at the pressure kind of thing. We're great at pressure, but when teams drop points in front of us, we're kind of like, it's happened a couple of times with Spurs and Chelsea and stuff, where we it takes us a while to figure out how to capitalize on those. So like you said, the best thing that we can do is go in at the start of the weekend and just get our win. Just win our game and go. We've got nothing on our mind. There's no game to try and catch up to. we're the first ones to play. We're going to win our game. We go home, and then the others have to catch up to us. It's a perfect opportunity if we can just go out, win this game. The players are just fully focused on it, because is the Fulham game? We go into that knowing Tottenham's result, right? I think Tottenham draw and Chelsea lose. And so we're going into that game going, like in and amongst all the other things about the prep and whatnot, we're also thinking, if we win this, we're going to be 3 points clear. So I think it's a good point that you bring up with regards to playing first. It's clearly been a bit of a pattern that Liverpool I think they would prefer to do the leading. They're now used to it. Like Ferguson used to say that it's a completely different skill to be leading at the top of the Premier League, and he would always challenge whether Liverpool could do that. And he's now admitted that Jurgen Klopp has put this into this team. This Liverpool team has learned how to overcome the obstacles and then overcome new ones. And one of those ones was, does Liverpool have the ability to stay at the top of the Premier League and break away? We're going to see that now. So, if we're at the top of the Premier League and we play first, we play like champions. We play to win. We do win. And then the rest have to kind of have that pressure on their shoulders. So it's good that the shoe's on the other foot now. And hopefully that pattern continues where we win our game and the others have to play catch up to us.
Yeah, and just to add to that as well, I think the start of the season, obviously we started pretty well. Won our first few games. We had the blip at Villa, and then there was, of course, the injury to Van Dijk. Then there was the injury to Gomez. Then there was a Thiago situation. Then there was Fabinho, who was out for a while. Then we had Firmino out of form, and then we had Salah maybe not being Salah. And we had all these issues that we had, and then it was like, this is Liverpool now. It's either sink or swim, and everyone probably thought we would sink straight to the bottom of the Premier League ocean, figuratively speaking, of course, and that the players coming in would not be able to cope. But Diogo Jota, who's come in and scored 10 goals or something like that, and obviously he's out now for a little bit too. But I've got a point coming to this. We sort of proved everyone wrong by keeping pace with everyone else who had basically full strength squads, and now we've just surpassed them in a way. Now there are some teams who have games in hand, as you said in the post Tottenham pod, and that's fair enough. These teams will have to catch up, and then the pressure's on them to deliver and basically let us know whether they're going to keep up with us and everyone else above them, or if they're going to choke and falter and just remain where they are and keep the status quo. In saying that, though, the way we've gone about our business in the Champions League and also in the Premier League bodes well, because when players are injured, that means that players will come back from injury. So if players are coming back from injury after such a congested period in the league in December, moving on to January now, then February, I think that leaves everyone else in the Premier League thinking like, shit, these guys are getting some of their players back slowly but slowly, and then these guys who have come into the squad and done well, they're going to be replaced by the proper, for lack of a better term, starters in this squad here, and we're going to see Liverpool just take over from there. And I think that's worrying for the other teams, because if we get our starting 11 right, once again, we know Van Dijk may be a little bit longer, same with Gomez, but if that midfield is on point, and if we can get maybe Gomez back just in time, around February or March, Jota comes back in 4 or 5 weeks or so, Thiago's firing in the midfield, that leaves everyone else worried.
Yeah, it's the analogy I always use for something like this is, it's when you go for a run and you put like 5 kilo weights on your ankles, and you go for a run, and Liverpool have been running with 5 kilo weights on their ankles, and everyone else has maybe been, depending on how many injuries they've got, maybe it's a 1 kilo or a 2.5 or whatever. But we had 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 kilo weights on our feet. And what you're saying is, what happens in Jan, Feb when we take those weights off? And the other teams are kind of thinking like, the only way we can stop Liverpool, the only way that Liverpool can be stopped is if they've got some weights on their feet, and where there's a possibility of us going 5, 6 points clear at the top. I don't want to jinx any of that, so we'll wait until the result after Crystal Palace. But if that happens, they're sitting there going, they've still got to take those weights off their feet. They're going to run fast, and especially if Thiago's taken those weights off the feet, then it's obviously a lot more glamorous.
I'm absolutely hanging for Thiago to come back into this squad and show us what he can do
Did
because
you
we still have a lot of teams to play again.
Did you hear Jurgen Klopp's joke? He goes, apparently people in the dressing room are joking. They go, we should sign Thiago in January. That was one of the jokes he made. He says, I can't wait. Well, we should sign Thiago in January. He'll be very good for us. So
It feels like that.
yeah, and it's funny because the way Jurgen does it and the way that he smiles and everything, you kind of you take it as a joke and whatever, but he doesn't. He tries not to just he doesn't want to say too much from the training ground. He wants to keep everything a secret. So the fact that slipped through, it's on his mind. He's a little bit annoyed that he hasn't been able to use Thiago. He bought this player. He doesn't usually do this. Goes in and gets a 29-year-old. It was a risk to do it, and it hasn't paid off so far. And so I think there's a bit of frustration coming out there, albeit in the form of a joke. So yeah, obviously, very very light-hearted way of saying we can't wait till he gets back.
100%. And when he gets back, everyone else slowly starts coming back. And before you know it, we've got a fully fit Liverpool team to hopefully knock out another Premier League back-to-back, hit number 20. How good would that be? Let everyone shut up and say Liverpool was a one-hit wonder. It's like, well, actually, no, we did it again in tough circumstances. So this ain't no one-trick pony, and Klopp knows what he's doing. The players know what they're doing, and got to give credit to Klopp's staff as well, from his his right-hand man all the way through to the physios, to the sports scientists, to the dietitians, and everyone at the club. I think we mentioned 1,000 times the culture and the work ethic he's instilled at Anfield cannot be doubted for 1 second, because if a player from the academy can come into the squad and play as though he's been playing with this team for the last 3 years consistently, I mean, that all stems from from the cultural aspect all the way through to being on the pitch and all working together. So fair play to Jurgen, and we know it's going to happen one day when he eventually leaves Liverpool or retires at Liverpool. We hope that there's going to be someone in the shadows waiting to take over and carry on what Klopp has done for us and for the club and for the fans. So fingers crossed we can keep producing academy players like Curtis Jones, Williams, Trent, and many, many more to come.
No, absolutely. He's best coach in the world for a reason.
He won the award as well, of course. How could we forget?
Yeah. And you just said then if there's someone coming in, I'll leave it on this point in terms of the idea of coaching, because we can do a whole pod on that. I really hope the perfect situation for me is Steven Gerrard comes in and Pep Lijnders for some reason has zero ego, which is impossible. But he just goes, I am very, very happy to walk Steven Gerrard through this job, because then you've got the personality and the bravado of Stevie G, and then you've got the nous and the Kloppness of Lijnders. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's one or the other. But that's the perfect situation for me. But I wanted to get your opinions on a starting lineup.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say, I was actually going to move and say, okay, what's your score prediction and who's going to be in the team? So actually, you read my mind before I could even put the question forward. But starting lineup, interesting enough for Alisson, obviously we'll start from the goalkeeper. There was talk when Kane tried to chip him after that sort of like botched clearance that Kane slid in that second half. They tried to chip him. The commentary, I'm not sure if it was the fantastic duo of Beglin and Drury. If it was Beglin who said he looks still a little bit injured or a little bit ginger because he wasn't sprinting back as he normally would. I don't know if that's still something playing on Alisson. Granted, he doesn't need to sprint being in goals unless there's like a breakaway from the opposition, but I don't know. I think he's very astute. Obviously, we're more than comfortable with Alisson in goal, kicking out with his short game and also his long game too. So, you'd say Alisson starts surely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think Jurgen Klopp usually puts in players before they're ready. When we had Brendan Rodgers, he was always forcing in Daniel Sturridge before he was ready because he needed to, because he knew his starting 11 was his only 11, and he knew Daniel Sturridge was the only thing he could use. Rafa Benitez did the same thing with Steven Gerrard and Fernando Torres, although famously would take those two off when he could, and it didn't bode well for him because he just didn't have the squad depth. Jurgen Klopp has never needed to do that. He's never even so much as thought about relying on one player. That's why we're seeing Thiago could come back, I reckon. They're just going, we want you to be 100% fit. It's simple as that. If this was Rodgers' reign, Thiago would be back and then he'd get injured again. But that's why we see Keita out, the length that he is, because Jurgen Klopp wants 100% fitness. He doesn't want people breaking down before they come back, even though Keita always breaks down no matter what. The reason why I say this is that Jurgen Klopp does that for everybody except one player, and I think that's Alisson. And the reason why I think that is because when Adrian comes in and we lose that game 7-2, then Alisson comes back in and he does incredible work. I can't remember who it's against when he comes straight back in. Jurgen Klopp says, you see the difference when Alisson's in goal. I've never seen him be so damning to a second goal, the reserve goalkeeper, without mentioning his name. He was not happy with Adrian, and Adrian hasn't played for us since. It's been Kelleher. Although Adrian may have played for us since, I'm not sure. But regardless, it's been Kelleher and Alisson. So if there's any player that's going to play, he's going to play through injury, it's probably the goalkeeper. Let's just hope there is no injury there. But yeah, Alisson starts, hopefully.
I'd probably say so. Back line, I think it's pretty self-explanatory at this point. You probably see Robertson and Trent at the fullback positions. Granted, Trent's also come back recently from injury, but seems to have recovered well because he's absolutely killing it. Robertson, on the other hand, there was a question about him maybe needing a rest against Midtjylland when Tsimikas was starting that match, and then he came off injured and Robertson came on. So, and without Milner being available as well to fill in as a pseudo left back, I think that sort of leaves Klopp in a bit of a tricky situation with Robertson. But if Robertson is fit to play, then of course he's going to play him every time.
Yeah, I think it has to be Robertson. I think there's a question on the other side. Perhaps Neco Williams can come in, but Crystal Palace are one of those teams that like to target, so they will sit there and target the right back because they're a grok team and they'll do shit like that. So yeah, I think with the fullbacks, it's touch or go with Trent or Williams. But who else is he going to put at left back? There's literally nobody. So yeah, has to be Robertson.
Yeah, fair enough. You want a bit of experience as well if you're going to be going up against Zaha and Schlupp and perhaps Eze as well. You're running out tricky, quick players. The centre backs, I think Fabinho and Matip would be it if Matip is back from his little midweek break. Obviously, not playing more than 2 or 3 games in a row is key for good old Joel. I'd like to see Reece Williams in there again. I thought it was great, but I think maybe a game 2 days later is maybe a bit too much for him.
Yeah, I think Klopp will probably, if he's got Matip available, he'll put him in. If it was my decision, I'd put Reece in. I'd keep Reece and Fabinho because it's the same thing with that Adrian thing where where Adrian came in and he let us down and Klopp's just like, fucking hell, can I even rely on you? If Reece Williams is coming in and performing the way he did against Tottenham, I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was so good. If he's doing that, why do we have to deal with this guy who keeps getting injured every 3 days? You've lost your spot. Simple as that. But in this, when games are coming thick and fast, Joel Matip is a great option to come in. I think he's rested. I think we saw that happen earlier in the season where Joel Matip, we didn't know if he was fit or not. He was clearly rested, and they're picking him for specific games. They had him in mind for the Leicester game, if I'm not mistaken. I think Matip plays the Leicester game. So they're picking and choosing his games, and they could have him against Tottenham, and then they could kind of lose him for even longer. So they've kind of just gone, let's just be safe. So yeah, it's probably going to be Matip. But if it was me, I'd just play Williams because he's been great, and let's just get him and Fabinho acquainted, and just if as soon as possible, if we can forget about Joel Matip being like relying on him, the better. Because what happens then is in big games where we need a player to come in, or every so often, we don't need to be using Matip for all those games. Like we just bring him in for the big ones, and Williams becomes the starting centre back because he's young, he's fit, he's not injury prone, he's tall, he's built like Van Dijk for some reason. So yeah, I would love to see Williams play again.
Of course, you want to see Williams playing against the best centre-back in the world and the best non-centre-back in the world as well in Fabinho. The midfield now. Midfield is going to be a bit of an interesting one here because if Jones is going to be rested for this match, so we don't have him play 3 games in a row in the space of 7 days. Not sure what his fitness is like, but the guy looks like he can just play for hours on end and not get tired at all. And the way he zips across the pitch, the way he receives a pass, the way he gives a pass, everything about him just makes me go, that's it, son, get in there. Like, he's forcing shit to happen that other people make look like it's a chore. He just makes things happen, and it's so easy to watch and so easy to see from him. So if he does get rested, does Keita come into this midfield, or do we see maybe Minamino run in there, shuffle the pack, and is Wijnaldum going to be able to back up a very intense game against Tottenham against a potentially intense game against Palace?
Yeah, I think you play. It's kind of like you can put the next two. You can kind of pick all of them together. You know Salah's right wing. Not to go too far ahead, but we can kind of kill two birds with one stone. You know Salah's up there, which means that Minamino's not playing out on the right. Does Minamino play off the left? Not sure. So he is a midfield option, but you kind of think that midfield three needs to have some chemistry in there. So you're thinking like Henderson, Wijnaldum are your players that can walk a player through the game. So if Jones is getting rested, I think the most obvious choice is Naby Keita, Gini Wijnaldum, and Jordan Henderson. If not that, you could probably put Oxlade-Chamberlain in there. He has not. I think you need to play Chamberlain with Wijnaldum and Henderson so he can be walked through the game. You could possibly give one of Henderson and Wijnaldum a rest. Even if you play Wijnaldum at the base of the midfield, he doesn't have to run as much. So I also love him in the 6 because he gets to turn people left, right, and center. Henderson kind of takes a little bit longer to go around, and he kind of plays a bit of a longer game, whereas Wijnaldum, sticks his butt out and just does his thing. There's a possibility of a Wijnaldum Jones Keita, or a Wijnaldum Chamberlain Keita, or you just go Henderson Wijnaldum Keita. That's probably the strongest midfield we can put out in terms of stamina, I would say. But I want Jones to play because he's amazing.
Makes sense. I'd love to see him start as well. And if he starts, he probably gets taken off after the 60th or 70th minute, perhaps, and then Keita comes on for him instead of sitting on the sidelines waiting to come on and not coming on and celebrating with Klopp, which might yet happen in this match again. But that front three, as you mentioned there, we know Salah's going to play. Firmino surely is going to play. The guy's on an absolute high. I'm absolutely buzzing for him after the last match. I still can't believe people were doubting this guy. Like, what the fuck is wrong with people? I can't believe they were doubting Roberto Firmino. Like, okay, so the guy hasn't scored 20 goals a season or whatever. I want to see. I don't want to see it happen, but figuratively, I'd like to see it happen where he's out of the Liverpool squad, and then people can see how much of a fucking hole there is in that squad, even though you have 11 players in there, man.
I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it.
I don't want to either. Like I said, figuratively, not literally, but it would just, it's the same thing with Wijnaldum. Like, what does Gini do? It's like, dude, if you can't see the amount of graft that guy puts into a match, just shielding the ball, protecting the ball, stopping the plays coming through, recycling a pass, beating one or two players so he can lay it onto a Jones or onto a Salah or whatever the case is. Like, same thing with Firmino. When the guy runs, he's like a magnet. The defenders gravitate towards him. And Salah says, oh, a gap of grass, I'm going to run into there. And then someone plays the ball to Salah, and then Salah's chance on a goal. That's how Firmino operates. So Firmino, for me, has to start in this match, and I want to see more from the fantastic number 9. And as we said at the start, Mane, does he start this match? Do we try and get him his customary goal against Palace, or does the ever questionable Divock Origi get a run in this match, or does Chamberlain start?
I think you need to play 2 of the 3. So it's just Klopp he always plays Mane. It's in these games where you think he can't possibly run anymore, he will put him in. It's crazy because remember there's an 8-day gap between this, and there's going to be Jurgen Klopp said in his press conference there's going to be a 3-day break right after this game. So the players are going to have a 3-day recovery. Especially at that new training center, they've got the new swimming pools, and they've got all those. They've got some interesting facilities there to take advantage of. But it has to be 2 of 3. So if you play Mane and Salah, you're probably going to see Minamino as your centre forward. I wouldn't mind that. I would prefer if Mane gets rested because Firmino has had a rest. He had a rest in that Champions League game. So if Firmino's playing and Salah plays, you've got your front three is still firing, which means you can bring in, a blow-in on the left. So that could, I don't think it's Minamino. It could be Origi. But if our midfield is going to be Henderson, Wijnaldum, Keita, I think it's a great way to blood Oxlade-Chamberlain into the side. There's low risk out there. I think that's another reason why Klopp likes putting him out there, because Chamberlain just needs minutes. He just needs minutes. And it's too high risk to put him in that midfield. I think he's a player that he thrives on confidence. So to get him back in the side, just to get used to everyone again, I think playing him left wing would be good. He also provides a bit more of a defensive option by being out there. And it's kind of like a pseudo 4-4-2 because Chamberlain is not playing left wing. He's kind of playing left midfielder. He joins your midfield three, and then you kind of got Firmino and Salah up front. So it's kind of like a skewed 4-4-2. And Robertson's going to be going up and down anyway on that left-hand side. So that left side will get its comeuppance. It's okay if Mane's not there. But I would like to see Chamberlain, Firmino, Salah, despite the fact that Pete hates a left wing-ish Chamberlain. But I would go with that. If not, then we're going to see the big div.
Big Divock Origi, and I think Peter would. I think he'd like to be right, but it also wishes he's not right in this instance, where we see Chamberlain start left wing before Origi starts in that front line. But
I know Pete's in a bad position because he doesn't like Origi there, and he doesn't like Chamberlain there, so he doesn't like either of them there. So it's going to be
one or the other.
I know Pete. He's I would say he'd prefer Chamberlain there for sure, because Chamberlain's going to give you the work rate, and what Pete wants to see at the very least, he wants to see the system, and Chamberlain can still do the system. I don't think he quite does the individual stuff when he's out on the left wing. He's more suited to being central, but he'll at least put in the yards, and that's the biggest gripe Pete has with Origi is if you're not going to score, then you might as well run. If you're not going to run, what are you doing in the side? And I can see Pete's point there.
And speaking of scoring, Palace have seen over 2.5 goals in 8 of their last 9 home matches against Liverpool in all competitions, so they have conceded at least 2.5 goals, for those hard to understand that particular phrase there, against us. But Liverpool have scored at least 2 goals in our last 6 away matches at Crystal Palace in all competitions. So, George Xanthis, I'm asking you now, what is your score prediction for this match?
2-0.
I was going to say 2-0 as well.
2-0.
I'm feeling a 2-0. A nice 2-0. Maybe a goal either half.
I think we've learned from those 2 games about we've conceded 2 types of weird goals. So yeah, 2-0. Let's keep a clean sheet. Let's do it. Let's get back to winning ways in style on the road.
I reckon that's the plan. Remember, it's 11:30 kickoff for us in the Southern Hemisphere, 12:30 kickoff lunchtime, and it's the whole thing of Liverpool and lunchtime kickoffs as well. I forgot to mention that whole thing there. Klopp's still adamant that the 12:30 kickoffs are not the best thing for us, but yeah, let's prove them wrong. I say, doubters to believers. Isn't that what our intro says? Isn't that what Klopp says?
From doubter to believer.
But thank you, George, for joining myself for this pre-Crystal Palace podcast, and thank you for joining me in the very late hours on this Friday night / Saturday morning. I suppose you've got a lot of time on your hands though, being in quarantine and all.
Absolutely, yeah. But it's been great. Thanks for having me, man. And I can't wait for tomorrow. I'm buzzing.
I'm absolutely pumped as well. I cannot wait for this match. Now, set the record straight, get us 6 points ahead, and let everyone else chase their tails trying to catch us. Don't forget, you can catch us on our social media feeds at LFC Couch on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube as well. Don't forget, subscribe to the podcast at LFC Couch. We are the biggest Liverpool FC supporter podcast in the Southern Hemisphere. I have been Nick Koloski. That has been George Xanthis. We are Liverpool FC. Up the Reds.